Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. 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 Again, joy to be here with everyone. And this topic tonight is we are channels for the divine to serve through us. And this really is the key to Seva. It's the key to our salvation even, because I think for all of us here, our lives are not going to be hours per day of meditating, but they're going to be filled mostly with Seva. That said, meditation is really essential, as we know with Ananda Seva, to learn how to be channels of that light. And this is the key to really successful Seva and service and giving to others. Because if we just give personally from our own limited energy, it can be good. We can help others and feed them and help them in so many ways. But it's more human to human, more emotional level and more personal. And divine love has a much greater power to help people. And in a way, our Seva really can be, and at its highest, is a tool, a vehicle for the divine to touch other people's lives. I'm always when I think of Seva, I think of a great soul at Ananda Village, Nayaswami Seva, who had the very appropriate name. And there's a beautiful photo of her that's kind of one of the, for me, is like one of the iconic photos of Ananda and what Swami Kriyanandaji gave to us. And she's holding up a plate of food to give to someone. And you don't look at the food, you look at her. There's just this radiant light and joy in her face. And you see that whoever was receiving that food was receiving a whole lot more than food or just even the personal energy of Nayaswami Seva. In fact, she had a certain impersonal, almost otherworldly look in her eyes, but with a deep joy and a deep warmth. But divine love, it's a very strange thing. Swami Kriyanandaji has talked about this. He said that divine love is impersonal, and it doesn't mean that it's cold and unfeeling. It means that God, Divine Mother, the Guru, loves all of us equally as her children, and there's no personal favorites in there. And because of that love, there's also just no sentiment behind it, and there's great and extraordinary power behind it. And you see this with the great saints. Now, how do we do this? Because it's a great theory, and we talk about it a lot. And why do we talk about something? It seems like maybe we should have figured it out by now. And here we are still talking about this concept. And that's because it's a practice. It's not just an idea, and it's not just something that we figure out mentally. It's actually a lifelong practice of learning how to get ourselves out of the way and let the divine flow through us. And it's a learning process. And I can say, after serving for 45 years, serving my guru and serving others, that it's a never-ending growth in this process. And I think in the end, the sort of the final success in this is that the divine is not just flowing through us. The divine, in a sense, has become us. And we are, not just channels for something flowing through, but I'll tell a story. I'll read a story. This is a hard thing to understand, but when we understand the great saints and masters, we can see this. And Swami Kriyanandaji talks about his guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, and he wrote about an experience he had with Master. And he said, once we were helping Master into his car because he was having trouble with his knees. He said to us, "You're so kind doing all these things for me." And we said, "Oh, Master, when one thinks of what you're doing for us, what is this kindness?" Then he smiled so sweetly and he said, "God is helping God. That's his drama." And then Swamiji writes, depersonalize it. Realize that it's all the divine show working through him, working through you, working through everyone. If you want to change this world, that thought alone will change it. Be in tune with God and realize yourself as an instrument for his love. And what Master said in this story, there's a deep truth to it. He said, God is helping God. And he was talking about it going both ways. He was saying that when he was serving others, it is God, him, or God in him, not even through him. He said, God is helping God. He didn't say, God flowing through me is helping you or God. It's God is helping God. And he was one with God. And so it was God in Yogananda giving to his disciples. But he was also implying that the disciples giving to Master, it was God helping God going that way too. And so how do we reach that point, and how do we work towards that point? There's a few ways, and a lot of it is just our regular practices that we do. One is that trying to have deep meditation every day when we commune with God, and when we feel God in us, and when we feel us in God, then when we start to change our identification from this little small Devarshi person who's a very small person, any good that people see in me is only to the extent that God is coming through. And it's sort of the quandary or the paradox of especially great saints and masters, that it's not them, it's the fact that they've gotten out of the way. And the more they've gotten out of the way, it's God not just flowing through them, but God in them, God serving God and God helping God. And this comes from meditation. It also can come from practicing the presence of God every day. of just chanting Om Guru all day long, identifying with the Guru. And when I say God flowing through us, this can mean Divine Mother, it can mean the Guru, however each of us relates to this more easily. And so when we practice and are in God all day long as much as we can, and again, this is a practice, it's not just an idea, it's a lifelong practice. But as we grow in it, then it becomes not something that we have to think about doing when we're serving others. We don't have to think about, okay, now I have to be a channel for God. I have to, stop doing what I normally do all day long and switch, gears and become a channel for God. But no, when we're in God as much as we can be all day long, then it's a natural expression of God, helping God when we serve others. It's no longer the little personality giving to God in this other personality. So this is a practice, and it's a way of changing our consciousness. But at times also, when we forget, we get caught up in the personal drama and maybe our own emotions, and then just try to consciously feel that not only is God flowing through us, but that we are helping God in the other person. And that's what Swamiji was talking about, where he said depersonalize it, because it's the divine show working through us and giving to the divine in the other person. And this is this isn't just an idea, and it's not just a philosophy, it's a reality when we start getting into this practice and this flow more and more. And so try to see God in the other person too, because that's part of the equation, God helping God. Yogananda didn't say God helping a person, he said God helping God. And so when we can see that we are giving to God in the other person, then it's easier to feel that we are part of this show of God helping God, and we're just in this dance, almost God dancing with God. I think I've been there in Vrindavan, serving the widows there, and it's just a dance with God, dancing with God when we share our love with them and they share divine love with us, and it's, who's helping who there in the end. It's just, we get into this flow of divine grace when we give in that way. But when we get away from that and personalize it rather than depersonalizing it, this is where, Swamiji has been asked this question. I heard him ask this question many times over the years, where people say, I'm a healer. I do massage healing or energy healing, and I just get so drained after I do a healing session. And Swamiji, his answer was always the same. He said, that's because you're giving of yourself. And if you're just giving of yourself, you have a very limited amount of energy to give. But when you're acting as an instrument for God and really experience it as God helping God, then there's an infinite power and energy. And it's not your own limited amount of energy that's doing this. So one other way that be creative in this, find your own way of getting into this idea of God helping God. I have a friend at Ananda Village, her name is Nayaswami Devarshjiji. She wrote a beautiful book on the chakras. And the way she put it, it's not a practice that I would do, but it's her practice, and it just shows how creative you can be with this. And maybe you can try this too, but she says that when she's talking to another person, she visualizes a rainbow connecting the top of her head to the top of their heads. And it's her way of just going to a higher level of relating to a soul rather than just to a person and a personality. Another way that you can do this, and that we can do this, is as something that Swamiji really often recommended, is relating from our center to the other person's center. And in a way, this is relating from God in us, relating to the God in them. And it's, in a way, it's like, rather than us personally relating to them, it's the divine relating to them, the divine in our hearts. So these are some of the practices. Another one that is really I think is maybe most important in the end, is just deep attunement to the Guru. And this was Swami Kriyananda's example. And this is how the divine flowed through him, and how he was a channel for the divine, was that he was a channel for his own Guru. And this is something that he talked about again and again. The practice that he had in his life very often, that I'm hearing more and more stories about this over the last year even, that he would chant Om Guru, very often, I think maybe all day long. He didn't talk about this much, but I'm hearing now from people who heard him doing it, when he was whispering to himself at times, and they could hear him chanting Om Guru, Om Guru. And so when you do this, and I'll tell a story. I just heard this not too long ago, just in the last few months, where somebody was going to a dinner. It was a very formal fundraising dinner at Ananda Village for the Crystal Clarity publishers. And they arrived a little bit early before anyone else, and they walked into the Crystal Hermitage, the dome house where this was being held. And they saw Swami Kriyananda, and he was off by himself. There was no one else there. This was the first person who came. And Swami didn't see them come in. And they could hear Swamiji talking to himself. And they thought, well, what's he talking to himself? And they listened closely, and he was chanting Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru. And so when he was with them at that fundraising dinner that evening, it was obvious that he was acting as a channel for Yogananda. And the way you act as a channel for Divine Mother, for God, for the Guru, is by just being one with them and being in tune with them. And when you're in tune with the Guru, with Divine Mother, with God, and you're to some extent one with them, you don't have to be like, complete samadhi, divine union with them, but tuning into them, to some extent, there's less of us and there's more of them. And by talking to the Guru, Om Guru, before we go out and serve and give. Because we are serving, and we have to do actions and perform practical things. And the mind may get away from, I'm supposed to be a channel for this. But if we're in tune and we're in that flow of grace in a natural way all day long, then it's a divine, that's when the divine dance happens, where it's God helping God, God dancing with God in a way. And so this is, again, it's a lifelong practice. Find ways, your own way to do it. Find a creative way to do it, that whether it's a rainbow connecting your head or just simply looking into the eyes of the person you're serving and seeing God's eyes there. For me, it's a practice very often, is something that Yoganandaji said, and I've shared many times. It's his words, where he says, take the dust of each one's feet, serving Mother where she sleeps. And he's saying, is because we're serving people, and they look like people, they act like people, and because they're acting like people, they can irritate us sometimes, and they can be grumpy and maybe ungrateful for how we give to them. It is what it is. I mean, we're like that too sometimes, so we can't point fingers except in all directions, including in our own direction. But if we just try to look past the personality again, because when Yogananda was talking to his disciples and said, it's God helping God, those disciples were not liberated. They still had some pretty funky karma that they had to deal with, and some of them betrayed the Guru and left the Guru, and yet he was serving the God in them. And so try to get beyond the personal aspect of it again and look into the heart and into the soul. And when we can do that, that's when we can start to awaken sleeping divine person. And that's the greatest gift that we can possibly give someone. And the food that we give the comfort that we give, the love we give, is really only a tool or a vehicle for awakening the divine in them. And that's the beauty that I've seen in Vrindavan. It's easy there in a way, because the thoughts of God and the Lord and Krishna are so strong there. And the widows, the Matajis, are doing their best to live in God. And it's easier to see, even when they might, have issues and be in not a good mood or whatever, it's easier to see the sleeping God in them. And so this is really what the saints do, isn't it? I mean, if you think of the greatest gift of all is that they've awakened the mind within each of us. And that's the greatest way that we can serve others. However we serve them, whether it's in practical ways, comfort, love, just holding their hand, offering some food. It doesn't matter what we do to serve and to give. The only thing that matters is how we do it. And that how is being an instrument for the divine to awaken the sleeping divine in them. And the wonderful thing about this is that when we practice this enough, the sleeping divine within us starts to wake up. And this is where Swamiji would say the instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. And so that's why this practice of Ananda Seva it's our liberation. It really is. Because by the end of a life of doing this as a day-to-day, lifelong practice, the divine becomes awakened in us to a degree that I think you might be really, really surprised by the end of this life. It's quite miraculous, the changes that we can all go through this practice. And I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I've seen it. So what a great blessing that we have to be able to have this as our lives. So may divine grace, may her grace, may the Guru's grace continue to flow through us. And may we see that grace in everything that we do and in everyone that we are serving. Now I think we will have some healing prayers, is that right?
Thank you, Devarshjiji. We'll have an affirmation and a prayer.
Okay.
From the Heart of Seva booklet. And I'll invite everyone now to sit upright. We can practice the affirmation loudly, starting with it, and then keep reducing our volume as we increase the intensity. Finally, we'll repeat it mentally, meditate for a few minutes, and end with a prayer. So let's sit upright. Let's take a double inhalation, double breath in, and double exhale, release. Double inhale, tensing the entire body. And double exhale. Release and let go. The affirmation is: God is the life behind my body, the intelligence behind my mind, the love behind my feeling, and the wisdom behind my ignorance. Let's repeat together now. God is the life behind my body, the intelligence behind my mind, the love behind my feeling, the wisdom behind my ignorance. A little softer. God is the life behind my body, the intelligence behind my mind, the love behind my feeling, the wisdom behind my ignorance. In a whisper now, God is the life behind my body, the intelligence behind my mind, the love behind my feeling, the wisdom behind my ignorance. Let's repeat mentally now, really feeling these words in our heart. God is the life behind my body, the intelligence behind my mind, the love behind my feeling, the wisdom behind my ignorance. God is the life behind my body, the intelligence behind my mind, the love behind my feeling, the wisdom behind my ignorance. Let's pray mentally and take this prayer into our meditation now. O Infinite One, make me a channel of thy love. Through me, reach out to sow the seeds of love in barren hearts everywhere. Let's meditate for 2 minutes. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you, Devarshjiji, for such a lovely satsang. We'll be sharing the recording to this link in the Circle of Love group, also on the YouTube channel, so we can tune into it and share this with everyone that we feel maybe benefited from it. And we'll also be sharing the link, the Facebook link on our Circle of Love group. So let's try to implement this with the prayer and affirmation for the entire month of February and share how that changed our experience of Seva, not just for the mothers, but in our daily attitude as well.
Thank you, Dvisha. Thank you, Joyita,
Thank
for
you
all
so
your
much.
seva, and nice to see some very dear friends here this evening.
Thank you,
Have a
Devarshjiji.
wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you.
Everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Divisha. Thank you,
Thank you,
Devarshji. Thank
Guru.
you,
Jai
everyone.
Guru.
Om Guru, Jai Guru.
You can end